Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk about 3DS authentication and what its role is in the payment ecosystem. So, 3DS is basically a security protocol that adds an additional layer of security to online purchases by requiring the cardholders to authenticate themselves with the card issuer when making a payment. So, the idea is to help prevent unauthorized online transactions, reducing the risk of fraud, and it can protect the merchant from chargebacks if the transaction is authenticated successfully. Now I just want to talk about the different components in 3ds flow. So as you can see from this flow diagram over here, we have the payers browser, we have the merchant's application, we have the payment gateway, and to be specific, the payment gateway's 3ds server is involved in this. This is the card scheme Visa, Mastercard, Amex directory server, the issuing banks ACS, the issuer's access control server. So wanted to talk about their roles in this in the 3ds authentication flow. So the payment gateway's 3ds server is responsible to collect the device browser data. It basically builds the authentication request and it propagates it to the directory server. The directory server then routes the authentication to the correct issuing bank's ACS, basically the customer's issuing bank. And the ACS is basically a component that operates in the issuing bank's domain, which verifies whether authentication is available for a card number and device type, and it basically authenticates specific transactions. Now there are two types of flows in 3ds. We have the challenge flow and we have the frictionless flow. Now the challenge flow is basically where the payer is redirected to the ACS and is required to respond to a challenge to identify themselves. Like you might have noticed when you're purchasing, you see this screen where you have to enter an OTP, which is when an OTP comes to your mobile number and you have to input it into a screen. It's a screen which says the card scheme's name and the issuing bank's name. And in UAE now we are actually moving from SMS based OTPs to in-app push notifications. So you will get this screen where it says approve a push notification in your digital banking application by verifying using your smart pin or face ID, etc. That is basically the challenge flow. Now the frictionless flow is basically an authentication flow where the payer is not required to respond to challenge because the ACS seems the payer as low risk. Just want to get into more detail into this specific flow, and then maybe I can show you a demo and then we can go into at a code level. So the whole thing starts with when the customer is trying to do a purchase at your website. Now we submit from MPGS perspective, we first submit the initial authentication request. This basically asks the gateway if the card scheme is enrolled, if the specific card is enrolled in the card scheme for 3ds. Now if it is, it basically returns a method URL, which is a script that allows the issuing bank or ACS to obtain additional browser information from the cardholder. Now this helps. So you can see there is a forms post in a hidden iframe using ACS call data, which is directly submitted from the payer's browser to the issuing bank's ACS. So this helps in making it a frictionless flow over challenge flow. As the more details the issuing bank has, the higher chances it becomes a frictionless flow, which makes it a smoother payment experience. Once that is done, the authenticate payer request is submitted from the merchant application to the gateway, and the gateway then propagates it to the card scheme's directory server and to the ACS. The response of this is basically the authentication flow the customer has to go through. It could be the frictionless flow where the authentication is completed. One more thing is, while you submit the authenticate payer request, you have to mention a return URL to which the user will be redirected to once the authentication is done. So that is something important. And coming back, the response of this is basically the authentication flow. It could be an frictionless flow or it could be a challenge flow. So as I've told you previously, the challenge flow is where the payer is responsible to complete the authentication. The payer is the issuer basically requires the payer to respond to a challenge. So your app will basically redirect the payer's web browser to the ACS challenge. Now this is what I was talking to you about. This could be a one-time SMS sent to your mobile number, or it could be a screen where it says approve an in-app notification in your digital banking application. And in the frictionless journey, it automatically redirects to the redirect URL which you mentioned in authenticate pair. And yeah, in frictionless flow. And in challenge, you have to complete the challenge, and once the challenge is complete, it will redirect you to the return URL which you have mentioned in authenticate pair. So once that redirection is done, basically from challenge or frictionless flow, this is when you actually attempt the pay operation, the final pay, to collect the to authorize the funds. So you have to include the 3DS authentication transaction ID along with it, and then this is where you basically attempt the authorization of funds, and then you get a success or failure. So just want to show you a demo of this at a high level. So I have a website, an e-commerce website, where I'm trying to show this 3ds flow. I'm just going to continue to proceed to pay, and it's prompting me to enter card details. I have a test MasterCard with me. As you can see now from my browser, you can see that I've initiated the initiate authentication request, and then you can see the authenticate pair request, and then you can see this is the challenge which I've gotten in the authenticate pair response. So as you can see, this is a simulation because I'm in the UAT environment. I'm just going to submit it. Now, as you can see, once I submit this, I get a payment success. So there are a couple of things actually happening over here. So let's just break it down. The first and foremost is the initiate authentication request. Now you can see that I started with the initiate authentication request to see if the card is enrolled in 3ds. Let me just show you a specific response. So this is how an initiate authentication request and response looks like from MasterCard MPGS. So you can see the API operations initiate authentication. The authentication channel is payer browser. The currency is needed, and then the actual card number is needed. So this is the request for a initiate authentication operation. Now you can see in the response I've got result success. Now in this is the important key field. I got a response gateway recommendation to proceed. So basically the card is enrolled in 3ds, and you can see the transaction status. This basically means that authentication is available, and the authentication.redirect.html. So this is the method URL which I was talking to you about. This is basically the script that allows the issuing bank to obtain additional browser information. So this is a form that auto submits to the ACS, and it gathers these additional details and is pushed to the ACS. So it helps in making it a frictionless flow. Once the initial authentication is done, then we attempt the authenticate pair MPGS operation. Now you can see the response over here. I'm just going to show an example of authenticate pair. So this is how the request looks for authenticate pair. Obviously, like from this is hitting my server. This is hitting my server from the client, and from my server I'm initiating the MPGS operations, be it initiate authentication or be it authenticate pair operations. So this is the MPGS request and MPGS response. So which I'm basically invoking from my server, which I will just show you. So you can see the card number is required, or the token is required. Here I have the card number, expiry, and year. The order details, amount and currency. So this is the redirect URL which I was mentioning to you to redirect to, and this is the device information, some browser details, time zone, screen. This is basically to render the 3ds challenge UI. What is your screen height and width, the IP address, and this is the API operation authenticate pair. Now this is the response of an authenticate pair operation. As you can see over here, the response.gateway operation is proceed, and the transaction status is authentication pending. So you can see over here in the authentication node we have so you can see there is it says pair interaction is required. So this basically means that the user has to go through a challenge flow, and these are some details about the 3ds authentication itself. So you can see this is the directory server ID, the directory server transaction ID, the ACS reference, the protocol version that we're using. So as you can see over here, this is the actual UI. This is the UI that we need to add to our DOM, which renders the ACS challenge flow or the frictionless flow. So in the challenge flow, we are basically rendering this on the DOM, and it will basically display. This is basically a form that gets auto submitted, and there is an iframe inside it. You can see over here where the actual challenge will be shown. Be it a one-time code that you have to input, or it shows an UI of the in-app push notification where you have to go to your digital banking application to approve the notification. And in the frictionless flow, it will basically it will automatically redirect me to my return URL. And once in the challenge flow, as you can see in the simulation page which I had just shown on the screen, once you submit on the redirect URL, it will basically so one thing is, once I submit, so I have also implemented polling over here, because my client needs to know when once you submit the challenge, it basically redirects me to my return URL, which I mentioned in the authenticate pair operation. So that is my server URL. So my client needs to know that the operation has been completed, so I can attempt the pay operation. So what do I do is I poll my backend to basically check if this operation has completed. So once the challenge is completed by the customer, it redirects to the return URL. And this is a URL. This is my server URL using which I update my DB that this authentication is completed, and I keep polling my backend to check if this has been completed. As you can see that I am polling my backend. You can do it at an interval of 2 seconds, 1 second, up to you. And once my client comes to know that the 3DS authentication flow is complete, then I actually attempt the pay operation. So you can see the pay is attempted over here. So I will show you a request. So this is a sample request response for a pay operation. This is the MPGS request. You can see that the authentication, this is where I'm basically passing the transaction ID from the previous 3DS authentication flow. So this is how it understands, okay, successful 3DS has been implemented. This is the order details. This is the source of funds using which I'm trying to attempt an authorization. And this is the reference. This is the order ID. And as you can see in my response, you can see that the 3DS ECI value is 02, which means authentication is successful. The liability shift happens to the issuer. Now you can see the response, the result success, and you can see the status is captured over here. Status is captured. So an authorization and a capture has happened successfully. You can see the total captured amount.